we're going to talk about how to efficiently read or speed read cases. And before we talk about that, I just want to tell you some of the advantages of reading cases. Reading cases will help you think like a lawyer. If you read cases, you're going to see the types of arguments that the parties make. You're going to see what convinces judges. It's an invaluable tool to help you think like a lawyer. Reading cases will also help you to read carefully and methodically. This will indirectly help you on the final exam too, because if you're able to read carefully, you're not going to confuse facts. You're going to understand what the fact pattern is saying, and you're hopefully going to be able to apply the law to answer that fact pattern. Reading cases will also help you learn to be analytical. And importantly, reading cases will help you prepare for class. The vast majority of your class time will be spent on cases. So if you have a good understanding of the case, you're going to be prepared for class and you'll be able to follow along with class discussion. And then lastly, reading cases will help you get used to this new vocabulary that lawyers use. You'll learn words by seeing them in context. However, there are two things that you want to note about reading cases. The first is that, generally speaking, reading cases does not directly help you on the law school final exam. In other words, unless you have a very unusual professor, you could read every single case and brief every single case and know the facts of the cases super well and do a great job on call and still not do well on the final exam. Because law school final exams typically do not test the facts of cases, and they do not test what happened in a specific case. Typically, they test whether you know the law and whether you know how to apply it. That's one major disadvantage of spending all of your time on cases. And in fact, it's a huge mistake that we see students make. They'll work super hard all semester, they'll know the cases really well, they'll put in all this time, and then they're so disappointed when first semester grades come back because they didn't do well. And the amount of time that they put in is not reflected in the grades that they get. And they often wonder why, and it's because they spent their whole semester reading cases, briefing cases, talking about cases in study groups, and preparing to be on call, but they neglected to do the other 4 things that you need to do to excel in law school. Outline, learn the law, learn exam taking strategy, and practice exams. The second issue is that you are going to be assigned a lot of cases. So if you read every word of every case, you're going to have very little time to do anything else. Let's just say that you have 75 pages of reading assigned a night, and it takes you 3 minutes a page. That's going to be almost 20 hours of reading cases a week. So that doesn't count actually going to class, preparing to be on call. It doesn't count any time you might want to spend in a study group. It doesn't count any time you might want to spend on legal writing assignments, yet alone outlining, learning your outlines, or practicing law school exams. So the problem in law school is that you don't have endless amounts of time. If you had endless amounts of time a day, you would spend time reading every case, writing a brief to every case, and then outlining, learning your outlines, preparing to be on call. But you don't. And besides all of that, you still have to sleep, you have to go to class, do laundry, exercise, and have a life to some extent outside of law school. So we recommend you spend an appropriate amount of time on cases and make sure you're still finding time to outline, learn the law, and apply the law during the week, as well as take care of your mental and physical self. How do you speed up the process of reading cases so that you can still read the cases, answer questions when you're called on, feel confident about the material, and follow along in class, all while not spending all of your time on this? Here are our tips. First, before you start reading, understand why you're reading the case to begin with. For example, if you look at the case of Tuberville v. Savage, and you look it up in your syllabus, you can see that it's underneath the category of assault, which is considered an emotional and dignitary harm, and that it is underneath the category of intentionally inflicted harms. So basically, you're going to read about the intentional tort of assault. This tells you the main point of the case. You're going to learn the elements of assault, or you're going to learn something about the tort of assault. Next, you want to read a case brief. This is an invaluable step if you want to efficiently read cases. It might sound counterintuitive, because now you have to read 2 things, the case brief and then you read the case, instead of 1 thing. but it will actually save you a lot of time when you're reading the cases. And let me tell you what a case brief will tell you. If you look at this example of Tuberville v. Savage, what you'll see is it has the facts, it has the issue, it has the rule of law, the holding, and the rationale. So case briefs can quickly help you understand all of the important parts of a case, and you can simply find them on Google. That way, when you read the case, you're already primed on what the whole case is about. You already know exactly what you're looking for. The next step is to go to the case itself, read it, and start to highlight it or mark different parts of the case. Like you can see in the case of Tuberville v. Savage that the issue's in green, the application or the reasoning is in purple, and the conclusion is in blue, and the rule is in orange. So you can either do this with a highlighter or you can just underline it or even mark it in the margins of your case brief. That way you're marking the important parts of your case so that if you're called on and the professor asks you what are the facts or what's the issue, you'll be able to quickly find that in your case. Now we're going to talk about what not to do. These are mistakes that I have made or that we've seen law students make. And they're things that you can avoid if you know about them ahead of time. So our first tip is do not pre-read cases. And by this I mean don't spend all day Sunday reading all the cases for the whole week. Why not? It sounds like a good thing to do on a weekend, you get them all over with. But the problem is by the time you get to your Thursday class, you're going to forget what you read on Sunday, and then you're going to be nervous, you're not going to be able to follow along in class, or you're going to have to read the cases again. It is better to read them as close to class as possible. So read them the night before class or read them the morning of. That way the cases are fresh in your mind and you'll be able to participate in class with more confidence than if you try to read them ahead of time. Second, as a general rule, and with some exceptions, get in the habit of book briefing instead of writing long case briefs to every case you're assigned. It will save you time. Third, don't be too hard on yourself. Be patient with yourself. This is a process that's going to take some time. You're going to feel frustrated sometimes when you read cases. And that's okay. That's part of the process of being a law student, is you're not always going to feel confident about what you're reading, or you're not even going to know what's going on all the time. So don't be too hard on yourself. And then fourth, don't forget about the other things that you should also be getting done. We'll talk about these in more depth, but reading cases is only one of the 5 things that leads to success on a final exam. And you don't want to spend all of your time on cases and then neglect the other 4 tasks. Do you ever want to skip this method and read every single word of a case, write a case brief, and spend a lot of time on a single case? Yes. This is why you have to use your best judgment. Maybe it's a super important case. Maybe you know you'll be called on. Maybe it's the only case your professor is talking about the entire next class. But for many cases, you're going to want to use this technique where you read them a little bit more quickly so that you can also have time for those other important activities like outlining, learning your outlines, and practicing exams.